Hello, today I'm going to present to you how to properly fill Frosttime's patented wing valve and CO2 canister. To do so, you'll need a bulk CO2 canister, as shown, and a Frosttime fill station, as shown. The first thing you're going to need to do is secure your bulk CO2 tank to a properly anchored position. In this case, it is a desk that has a proper clamp that's been built and designed for locking onto desks. In your case, it might be a wall connector or wall rack. Talk to your local distributor to get the appropriate measures to actually secure your canister to a safe location. I'm going to remove the cap, and I have orientated that this tank is pointing in a direction that is not towards any persons or any items that may be of concern. Because as we said, this is a liquid CO2 system. This is under high pressures. Accidents can and will happen. So we do everything that we can to prevent that from occurring. And in case that something does happen, we reduce the likelihood of anybody getting injured. You'll first take the Frosttime fill station, which consists of a threaded connection that connects to the valve of the actual bulk tank, a three-way valve, the corresponding attachment for the Frosttime wing valve, an exhaust hose that connects to a muffler to reduce the sound. To install the system, the first thing you're going to need is this washer. Now this washer corresponds to a CGA 320 valve, CGA being the governing body for North America. If you're in another country, I advise you to go ahead and talk to the people that you received your bulk CO2 tank from to get the proper valve connection. So, I take the washer and I place it on the end of the nipple. I pull the nut over the washer and the nipple such that it is completely pushed up against the back flange of the nipple. I then take the entire assembly and I place it in front of the threaded connection. I begin threading the nipple on by hand. Now you should be able to do this up until the last 2 or 3 threads or so of this threaded connection on the valve. Once you're in that position, support the entire system and using a 1 1/8 wrench corresponding to the CGA nipple or nut to tighten down the entire system. Once that has been done, you'll want to go ahead and check that you actually have a proper connection, that there are no leaks in the system. Simple way to do that is to simply slowly open up the tank valve. Well, there are no whistling or high-pitched squeals of any leaks on the system as is, so we're able to proceed. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a scale that's provided to you with the fill kit and put it onto one of these 4 prongs. These 4 prongs are positioned in such a way that you have customizable, or properly stated, a modular system that can orientate it towards the user. In this case, for the sake of properly demonstrating what's going on, I have faced it towards the camera. You will then take your CO2 system, CO2 canister, I should say, from Frosttime, and you will take the other the fill head in your right hand. You can use either hand as you see fit, but the important part is that you go ahead and orientate this wing, or in this case it looks like a T, such that it'll fit into this slot. So in this case I simply rotate it down 90 degrees on top. I then push the tank on and rotate it 90 degrees either clockwise or counterclockwise. At that point, I can now turn the handle up to the top. And what this does is it pushes a pin down into the Frosttime valve, which contains a check valve. That allows the CO2 to flow into the tank. To disconnect the whole assembly, simply rotate the handle down to the 90 degree position, perpendicular from the fill head side. And then rotate 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, and you may pull the valve off like such. So, to repeat, put into position, rotate 90 degrees, turn the handle upright. I then hang the entire system through this loop on the handle onto the hanger of the scale. I then turn on the scale, at which point, once it's started up, it'll show 0, 0, 0. Now, if I'm filling multiple tanks in a row, you can go ahead and continue to weigh each one and tear it out, which is to go ahead and press 0. But first, before we do that, we want to go ahead and vent this tank, because you might get these back with some residual pressure in them. To do so, I grab onto the handle of the three-way valve and I rotate it towards the muffler. And what that does is that allows the CO2 from the line here to go down that branch. Now, you might not be able to hear it, but there was a slight amount of pressure still left in this tank. So I rotate that back into the upright position, which closes it from both directions. Now, it's time for me to actually fill the tank. I rotate the valve handle towards the CO2 bulk tank. And when I say towards, I guess what I really mean is that there's a point on this valve to give you indication of flow direction. And as this is going on, liquid CO2 is being dumped into this smaller container from here. Now what we're looking for is an equalization of pressure between the two, which typically occurs at roughly 1.6 pounds. That can change depending on the temperature, the bulk tank, how much liquid there's actually left in the bulk tank, and what have you. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and stop it at 1.54. So once you've actually opened it up, what's occurring is liquid CO2 is traveling into this lower pressure area. And what actually happens is that a portion of that liquid CO2 evaporates, and that's part of the phase properties of CO2. So now we have a partial mixture of, at the bottom of our frost time tank, liquid CO2, and above that, vapor. So now we need to bleed off some of that vapor, so that way we can, once again, pour more liquid CO2 into the canister. So to do so, I simply vent, as I've done before, by changing the position of the valve handle towards the vent line. I'm going to let it drain by 0.3 pounds. So roughly, in this case, 1.28 pounds should be my end result. Now I have overshot that. That's not an issue. It's no big deal. You're just effectively wasting a little bit of liquid CO2, and it's something we would like to try and avoid. So do your best to relieve 0.3 pounds. And the reason why we chose 0.3 is because through our process of trials and testing, we found that that's the appropriate measure to get you close to a full fill on just simply 2 rotations. So now to finish this out, I'm going to rotate the handle of the three-way valve back towards the bulk tank, which is now increasing the liquid inside the actual tank itself. So we're at 2.1 pounds, 2.2, and it continues to rise slowly now as we've increased a substantial amount of liquid CO2. Now in this case, I am going to have to stop the whole process and bleed off a little bit more of the actual vapor in the system. So once again, rotate 90 degrees towards the vent line. Now in this case, I haven't bled off 0.3 pounds. As you get closer to the 2.5, you can reduce the amount that you're bleeding off. So I'll simply turn to the right, 90 degrees. And stop it. Now, in this case, I have filled up to 2.56 pounds. I need to bleed off 0.06. These tanks are rated for 2.5 pounds, no more. So, if you're going to err on the side of caution, fill it to slightly less than 2.5 pounds. And there I am. Now I'm at 2.48 pounds. Now to remove the entire pressurized system, the first thing that I'm going to do is disengage this handle and rotate it 90 degrees such that it is perpendicular to this face. And I can do either side, whatever is more convenient for you. Once I've done that, I need to bleed off the liquid that's remaining inside of this line. I rotate to the vent side and drain it off. I then go back to the upright position and I rotate the tank off and simply pull it off. Now, there are circumstances if you're a little bit shorter or you have less strength in your arms, you might find it useful to go ahead and place the tank onto your thigh. Now, this might not be very easy to see, but what I'm actually doing is grabbing the tank up top, and in this case, my right hand is my thigh, and I'm pushing down on it. Or in my case right now, I'm pushing on my chest. And what that enables you to do is get a little bit more leverage to wiggle this off. It's a recommendation that we've found in the field that has been useful. I advise you to use it if you're, as I said, a little bit smaller or you have lesser upper body strength. So the last thing you're going to need to do is obviously take the system off and put it onto another tank if you need to. So the first thing you want to do is remove your scale. Close the tank valve proper. And I do that simply by following the orientation of what the valve stem shows. So in this case, clockwise is closed, counterclockwise is open. There's now still a portion of liquid CO2 at higher pressure inside this nipple and nut. So I need to relieve that. To do so, I grab onto the actual fill head and I make sure that my fingers are clear of the actual outlet. I take and rotate back towards the vent, or back towards the tank valve, and bleed off a little bit of pressure that remains. I simply leave that in the open position, and I take my wrench and I remove the entire system by rotating and removing any of that torque that you'd already put on. And then I remove it by hand. And then, in theory, rotate this little signet to tell everybody that it's empty, and I put the cap on top. As a last note, always make sure to wear proper protective equipment. In this case, safety glasses are a must. Thank you very much. I hope you have good luck in filling all of your CO2.